Hello and welcome to the Nature Unplugged podcast, where we are all about inspiring wellness in the digital age. Let's get going. All right. Hello and welcome to the Nature Unplugged podcast with me, your host, Sebastian Sloven. I am so excited for this episode. At Nature Unplugged, we are hugely passionate about the importance of mental health, and that's a big reason why we do what we do. Our focus is a lot of times on the preventative side of things, the upstream side of things. And while that's super important, it's also very important to know what to do in a mental health crisis. Our guests today are from the San Diego Suicide Prevention Council. Yeni Palomino and Lora Cayanan are here to share about the importance of suicide prevention and provide some tips and tools for how to be prepared in a mental health crisis. And we're just going to learn more about also the amazing work they do. So Lora and Yeni, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, I'm excited. So before we jump in, I'm gonna share your bios so people have more of a sense of who y'all are, and then we'll dive in. So Yeni, I'll start with you. Yeni Palomino is Vice President of Community Health and Engagement at Community Health Improvement Partners. CHIP is the acronym. Palomino has extensive work experience dating back to 2003 in addressing the issues of environmental justice and public health in underrepresented and underserved populations in San Diego. Palomino has worked on issues relating to behavioral health since 2014 and currently serves as lead facilitator of San Diego County Suicide Prevention Council. And Lora Cayanan is the program manager for Community Health Improvement Partners, CHIP, and the San Diego County Suicide Prevention Council. Lora has spent the last 6 years working at CHIP, previously serving as program coordinator, program assistant, and intern. You've done sort of all the things. And she became a certified QPR, question, persuade, and refer trainer in 2015, and oversees the training program for San Diego County with over 22,000 individuals trained since 2011. She's also an applied suicide intervention skills training or assist instructor. Lora received her bachelor's in biological sciences from UC Irvine and her master's of public health from National University. And I just, on a personal note, I'm really grateful for for you both being here. I've known you two for a little while now. I've been involved in the Suicide Prevention Council, and as some of the listeners may know, this is a subject that's very personal to me. I lost my dad to suicide when I was young. And I know how important this work is and how difficult this work is, how it's, so tough to be doing what you're doing, and it's so critical. So for a variety of reasons, I'm very grateful to be having this conversation, and I'm grateful for you being here. I want to say that I did mention that this can be a difficult thing to listen to. And so if you are listening to this and if you're feeling like thoughts of suicide, or you or a loved one is, there are a lot of resources out there. We're going to share more, but I want to share this up front that the Suicide Prevention Lifeline, the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, is 1-800-273-8255. And if you're in San Diego County, that also works, but you can also call the San Diego Access and Crisis Line, which is 888-724-7240. Okay. A lot of info up front. Anything else though on any sort of resources that would be good to share up front? Or not?
I think that's definitely the main one, and okay. We'll definitely share more as we continue the conversation. But that's the one at the top of the marquee for sure.
Awesome. Okay, so I read your bios, but I'd love to hear or learn a little bit more about who you are and what brought you to doing this work. So Yeni, how about we start with you? Can you just share a little bit more about your background and how you came to work in this world of community wellness and suicide prevention?
Definitely. So I'm actually born and raised in Los Angeles, in South LA, actually. And so, growing up, I actually got bused out into East LA. And so I never knew that the communities that I lived with, were what now we know as disadvantaged or, under-resourced. That was just sort of my daily life. And when I got to sort of step out of that, got to go to, UC Santa Cruz for my bachelor's, and then ended up actually moving back to LA, I got this opportunity to really start to look at the community in a new way. I learned so many things about, living with different people, living in different areas, and come to realize that the communities that I was living in, I'm like, wow, they really did struggle. And so, this innate nature when I was in school to like start to figure out how could I help my community? How could I make the place where I grew up a little bit better? And so that's kind of what started my path in like community wellness and just improving communities overall. And that path sort of took me down into San Diego, where I started working on environmental justice issues. And that in turn kind of started letting me really get to know San Diego a little bit better, started getting to understand what was the concerns that were happening here. And then I got an opportunity to work with community health improvement partners to create a resident leadership academy, which was basically to train residents to help them make some improvements in their community. And funny enough that as I'm working with community, I'm realizing that they actually are having a lot of issues with mental health that are affecting the way that their communities are impacting them. So it's like all these negative effects are not just impacting what we see as they don't have jobs, they don't, they're struggling with school, but it's also a mental impact that was happening to them. And so I was able to do some work and get trained as a applied suicide intervention skills trainer in 2012. And that really sparked my interest in suicide prevention. And my organization had an opportunity for me to be able to go become a trainer for that. So I did a train the trainer back in 2012. And since then, I've done over 10 trainings. I'm now a master trainer in applied suicide intervention skills training. I was offered the opportunity to be able to run the council and support all of its different aspects. And that, it was interesting because I was working in it for about 5 years, thinking to myself that, wow, I don't really have any direct personal connection to suicide, but it matters to me to help others, right? And then all of a sudden, in one of the trainings, a suppression like memory came up where it actually turns out that when I was in high school, I had a girl that had a suicide attempt. And, this might activate a few people. So, just want to warn folks. But while I was in high school, I actually had a girl that had a suicide attempt. And I was the one that people called. One of the kids that knew she was doing that at school called me and said, you need to help stop her from doing that. She's about to suicide. And so I ran in to help, not knowing what I was getting myself into. I'm 15 years old. I actually ended up getting hurt in the process myself because she didn't want me to interrupt her. And we ended up not speaking after that. And she didn't talk to me. She was very upset with me because I basically called in campus and, staff and everybody. And so it turned into a major thing. And so it was something that had impacted me so much without realizing it that I had suppressed it and hadn't thought about it in like over 10, 15 years. And then all of a sudden it just kind of like brought it all up. And what I've realized is that that's where it happens the most. It's with friends and family and people that because
Right.
since I've been doing this work now for 10 years, I can tell you that I've helped more people in my personal life than I would say I've been able, what feels like the bigger picture for me, where I'm like, wow, what I do really helps every day because my family, my friends will actually call, or I can recognize a sign and say, are you thinking about suicide? And they'll say, oh, that's your job talking. But then they'll break down and say, but you know what, it's true. I have been thinking about it. And so that's why I do the work that I do, because, it really does matter with the people that you love and care about the most.
Yeah, it's amazing background, and I appreciate you sharing that. It's also, I found it incredible that you had been doing this sort of work for a while, and that memory was sort of like not at the forefront. I think that's very common too with things with suicide and mental health stuff. It sort of just gets, for a variety of reasons, I think, gets sort of pushed aside.
it's very cultural too. You know,
Right.
I grew up as a Catholic Latina, where, you know, we didn't, the suicide conversation was something that I wouldn't say it was taboo. It was literally just, you know, we don't do that. God gave you life. God will take your life. You don't get to interrupt that sequence. And for
Right.
whatever reason, it was just something that at a young age, you're told and you accept, or, you know, and then you challenge, and then it's challenged if your thoughts go against that. And so that's where people struggle. In most cases, if it doesn't, then you just, like me, I was just like, yeah, that's just what it is, you know. But for many people, when they struggle, it's like, no, that's not how it is for me. And are there any other options? And the beauty of that now is that as we've been working with faith communities in the Suicide Prevention Council, we've been able to work and get to the point where a lot more faiths are understanding that people can have a space where they can be thinking about suicide, and that they can get additional help to what they're getting from the church, you know, that they can get some additional support from mental health services as needed, and that it's not a sin, and that they, you know, can still have a full faith experience and have mental health, you know, issues and concerns.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, there's more we can talk to you about that. I want to bring Lora into the mix as well. Um, Similar question to you, Lora. Could you just share a little bit more about your background and then how you got involved with CHIP and with the Suicide Prevention Council?
Sure. So, as mentioned in the bio, Sebastian just shared, my background is in biology because growing up, I always knew I wanted to do something that was helping others, and that route was always in my mind healthcare. So, of course, get your biology degree, become a doctor, and you're going to be involved in health. But when I got to the point of graduation, I realized that kind of route wasn't for me, and I wanted to kind of explore more of those options. So, after 4 years in Irvine, I moved back to San Diego and was kind of at this exploration phase. And I found an opportunity to work with Community Health Improvement Partners, or CHIP, as an intern. And this was more of a learning opportunity for me rather than a job that I wanted to pursue right at the beginning. However, after getting immersed into what CHIP has to offer, so community health throughout the entirety of San Diego County and all different aspects of health, it was very clear to me that this was exactly what I wanted to do because growing up, and even to this day, I think treatment and getting to the hospital or getting to a clinic is what one would think of when they think of their own health. So kind of at the very end of their rope when that happens. But with CHIP, it's really kind of exposed that health happens in your homes, in your places of worship, in your schools. And that's what it really kind of clicked for me, that public health and community health was something that I wanted to do. And getting into suicide prevention was more of a chance opportunity. It was one of the departments that I first got to work with as an intern, and it became such an eye opener for me because here in San Diego, there are so many people working on suicide prevention and mental health efforts, and they're working together, which was amazing because I'd never seen that kind of collaboration before. And everyone knew each other, and everyone wanted to work toward this common vision of preventing suicide. So, kind of following that internship opportunity, I was blessed to be able to receive the position offer for a program assistant. And in that same time, I decided to pursue my master's in public health. So it's been about 6 years now since all of that was said and done. And I always thought, you know, I never had that pure connection to suicide or mental health because, oh, you know, I hadn't lost somebody the way that, you know, traditionally people would come out and share. But the more I got into the work, the more I knew and the more knowledge that I gained, it was actually more of, am I suppressing it? Similar to Yeni's story. You know, I grew up in a Filipino American family. Both my parents were in the military, so it's very tough as nails. Don't show too much emotion. You know, get through it, work through it, and then just kind of power through. But similarly, in my personal life, there were a lot of things going on with my immediate family where now mental health and suicide were actually talked more often. And I had that knowledge base to be able to, you know, be someone that they could talk to when they were facing those challenges of suicide ideation and or mental health. So my biggest takeaway from this position and being involved in community wellness and suicide and mental health is that it's not just going to be a professional hat that I'm wearing. It's also going to spill over into my personal life because as Yeni also said too, you know, this may happen more oftentimes in, you know, our own family, our own friends, our own social networks, rather than who we serve or who we directly impact between our 9 to 5 role. So that's just a little bit of the background that I have, but kind of growing up in this kind of military culture too, it's also kind of exposed, there are probably a lot more things going on within my own family and within their own well-beings that I hadn't even been aware of, because they might have tried to push through these difficult times. And having this opportunity to work with priority populations, that prevention council work has really just made it more closer to home than ever. But I'm very grateful for kind of just happening to find this role, this position, and led me to this path of community health and being a public health figure here in San Diego County, and leading us to even connect with community members like yourself, Sebastian, over the years has been such an honor.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. And I think both of your stories are like fascinating, and I think illustrate that even if it's not a direct thing that's like, really upfront, it's mental health or suicide, I think, is impacted. It touches everyone, you can't really. And it's interesting too, I think I resonate with that story. I think my dad was very much like that, kind of just don't show any sort of weakness or emotion. And I think those are interesting cases too, where there's often, stuff going on beneath the surface. And it's really amazing and beautiful that you now have the skills to, maybe just know how to work with that. So it's really cool. So thank you both. Before we jump into, I want to talk about, signs and what to look out for, and give people kind of more info on that. But I also, I want to just, if you could, maybe Yeni, share a little bit more about, so what is CHIP? You've mentioned it a little bit, but, and how does the Suicide Prevention Council fit into that? Could you share a little bit about that?
Definitely. Thank you for asking. So CHIP's mission is, well, first of all, CHIP is a nonprofit local organization here in San Diego County with over 25 years of working in community health. Our mission is to advance long-term sustainable solutions to priority health needs. And we do that by collaborating, working together, and really engaging the community to be able to advocate to make these solutions get implemented and make some long-term changes. And we actually initiated an unfunded suicide prevention work team back in 1999. So before anybody was putting any money on it, we understood that it was something that was impacting the community and something that was a priority, because we were really on the ground listening to what the community was needing and asking for. And so we brought together an unfunded group, and we maintained it for over a decade, doing some work without any funding, just, from being able to kind of do what we could with different partners that were interested in the same topic. And then in 2010, after seeing that work and being able to gather the data and sort of making the case for really needing at that point real funding to be able to do some real work on the really county-wide level. So in 2010, the County of San Diego Health and Human Services Agency here contracted with us and to facilitate the creation of a county-wide suicide prevention action plan. And that was led by a suicide prevention action plan committee that was basically formed from a lot of the people that were working in our work team, on top of extending ourselves out to other partners that would be key stakeholders. Then in 2011, that action plan was finalized, and that committee then realized that in order for that plan to really be implemented, that committee was going to have to stay active and really keep supporting the implementation of the plan. So now we have this great plan. What are we going to do with it? So they didn't want to see it go to waste. They didn't want it to get shelved. And so they advocated for the committee to become what we all now know to be the San Diego County Suicide Prevention Council. And so that council is now obviously extended. It has many more partners. We're really about making sure that everybody feels welcome at the council. So from a person, like everyday person that wouldn't think, how am I going to connect to this big old council, to, yeah, the head of behavioral health services, or the director of scripts, or the director of behavioral health at the Center for LGBTQ. Like, these are all the different levels of partners. But when we talk about partners, we mean from the person that's feeling it because they lost somebody, to the person that's running, behavioral health services for the major institutions or different partners that we have here in our county. We really want to make sure, because it takes all of us to really make a difference in suicide prevention, working together, resources, leveraging. And with that, after working in that space and really implementing the action plan in 2016, it was really key to be able to show that that effort was worthy of expanding those efforts. And so in 2016, the county offered another opportunity of funding to expand the council, update its plan, and really continue to move forward with a lot of the great work that the council had done for the previous 5 years. So we see ourselves now at the end of that, and we are now 11 years, and we updated our action plan in 2016, finalized it in 2018. We had over 650 stakeholders from across our county, with more than half of them having had some level of lived experience. So either they helped somebody, they had lost somebody, or they themselves had thoughts of suicide. And we made sure we covered all of the different areas in our county, the different partners and stakeholders. And that produced for us an action plan that we call the Wheel, and it has now 9 strategies to help prevent suicide in our county. And it really looks at a life cycle approach to suicide prevention. I'll skip kind of the details of all the different strategies, but if you go to our website, www.spcsandiego.org, you can see our updated action plan. You can see all the information on our on all the different strategies within that wheel and more of our history.
Yeah,
but we're definitely proud to have do all that work.
Absolutely. And it's amazing, I've only known about the Suicide Prevention Council for several years, but it's amazing to hear the story of how it started, just from something that you all saw in the community and knew it was necessary to tackle, and to look at where it is now. And I'll say that I'm kind of like just an individual that's interested in this stuff. I had no idea about this kind of the world of suicide prevention. And then Suicide Prevention Council was one of the first places I went to sort of get involved in the community. And I think what you say is very true, that I felt, even though I wasn't part of some bigger organization, I was welcomed like family, and it was it was just welcoming environment. And I've met so many people, and it's been such a great resource for me, and continues to be a great resource for me. And so you all are doing incredible work.
Thank you. That's honestly the biggest goal, for me and my team, is just for people that just don't know, kind of, hey, I just kind of want to know more and come into something and just really be able to have the council be feeling that exact feeling. We really want people to come in, feel like family, use our resources, and be able to connect to others and be able to really push that work forward, because you start to connect and know what everybody else is doing. So, we're so much better at helping people because we actually know the other person that might be able to support them in those needs. So, for us here, we're proud to share, that we're actually one of the few counties in the state of California that even has an action plan for suicide prevention, and this great collaborative effort, to put this into action. So we really pride ourselves in staying sort of ahead of the curve, innovating, but still listening to the needs of the community and making sure that they're really there with us, hand in hand.
Yeah, no, it's great work. I'm again, grateful to have you all here. It's really cool. I want to shift gears a little bit. It's, I think, helpful to understand like what CHIP is and what the Suicide Prevention Council is. I want to shift more into like, what to do if a loved one is dealing with suicidal thoughts, or if you or a loved one is dealing with that. I guess I'd love to hear, maybe Lora, if you want to start. I know you're both a wealth of knowledge, so Lora, maybe you can start. But what can people do? Again, on this podcast, for context for you all, we mostly talk about like more preventative stuff, like healthy boundaries with technology, healthy boundaries with social media, getting out into nature, moving your body, which is all very important. I look at it as like really early prevention, sort of suicide prevention stuff. But when people are really dealing with a crisis, this is on their mind, they're thinking about it, when suicide is on their mind, what are some things that people can do, or what signs that people can look out for?
Definitely. And when we talk about mental health, when we talk about suicide prevention, sometimes it's still a little bit stigmatized or taboo, or even a very fearful topic to even address, even if they notice signs or they feel like somebody might be suicidal. But what is important to know is that those people are hurt or in pain. And a lot of our jobs require us to respond to those situations when it comes to our physical health. We know CPR, we know first aid, but mental health and suicide prevention are just as important. And what we want to do is really normalize the conversation about suicide and suicide prevention. We don't want to shy away from addressing how one might be feeling emotionally or what they might be going through when it comes down to suicide. So some of those warning signs one might notice in an individual. Maybe they're talking about suicide. They're saying these phrases, I'm thinking about ending my life, or I just can't do this anymore. Maybe it's behavioral. They're kind of withdrawing from their friend circle or their family gatherings. Maybe they're giving away their prized possessions. And sometimes it could be situational too. They might have been going through a very difficult breakup, or they just found out that their pet died. There's a plethora of reasons why someone might be contemplating suicide, but kind of the first thing we really want to emphasize is ask the question, ask directly about suicide, talk about it. Don't, ask like, hey, are you unhappy, and kind of leave it at that, or wait for somebody else to maybe pick it up if they notice too. We really just want to empower folks to know that you can ask the question and really refer them to resources, which is the biggest key. If you do notice that somebody is going through a crisis, there are plenty of resources here in San Diego County, also nationwide. I know we've mentioned this several times, but calling the Access and Crisis Line is another way to kind of get someone to that care, to that next level, and really just forwarding their kind of path into recovery and to help. And knowing that you're somebody that they can turn to. So being there, being present is always going to be a big part of suicide prevention. It's listening to the individual. It's walking with them through whatever difficulties that they're experiencing, and then just being someone that they can lean on in those times of need. So we really want to focus our attention on, addressing suicide and mental health the same way that we do with our physical health, and in that same vein, talking about it the same way too.
I love it. Yeah, thank you. That's super helpful. And I remember, I think it was the first time when I was working on my book about my dad, that's when I got involved in the Suicide Prevention Council. And I think the first time I went to a meeting, I found out about a QPR training that was going on like right after the meeting. It was the first or second meeting. And I went to the QPR training. That was my first formal suicide prevention training. And that was one of the first things that you all both know, but there was a role play segment with, are you thinking, asking your partner or someone next to you, are you thinking about suicide, or are you having suicidal thoughts? And it was such I think, helpful thing. And Lora, you spoke to this, but just to be, you're not beating around the bush here. This is don't wait for someone to come to you. But I think that's such a huge thing to be direct. And I think it's such a helpful thing to break the stigma and not kind of like, because it's so much of this stuff, I think knowing how it was with my family was so much in the shadows and kind of like tiptoed around. And so it's very refreshing to go straight at it. Yeni, I wanted to just open it up to you too, to anything else you wanted to add about, signs and symptoms or what to do if you or a loved one is dealing with suicidal thoughts.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I would just reiterate what Lora said. It really is important to reach out for help, or if you see somebody that's struggling, ask the tough question. If you're wondering about it, then you should ask about it. So if you're even in your mind, what's up with that? What's up with him? What's up with her? What's up with they? Then it's a good time to ask, because what happens is that for a person, it's almost like waiting for somebody to ask you, because that means that they're okay with the answer, right? And so it doesn't mean that you have to save them. It doesn't mean that if something happens to them, it's on you. It just means that you're actually going to give them an opportunity that maybe they haven't had before, for somebody to see them. What happens a lot when you're having thoughts of suicide is that you feel so unseen and so unheard, that to just have somebody say, are you okay? Can I call somebody for you, with you, And so the access and crisis line is not just for if you are in a crisis, but if you need access, if you need to help somebody and you don't know how, you can call them yourself. And I've done this before for my own friend, where I had to call the access and crisis line because my friend was in another city and I couldn't be there, but I could sort of triage and send help. And so I called the access and crisis line. I called some friends that were there local, and they basically helped, they helped me to sort of understand what can be done. And then they helped me and supported me in helping her. And I was able to save her from a really tough moment that she was having in life. And so I highly suggest, that you save this number, grab your phone right now, 888-724-7240. That's the one for if you're here locally in San Diego. If you are outside of San Diego, 1-800-273-8255. Go ahead and lock it in your phone now so that you just have it ready. It's one of those where you don't want to have to use it, but you know that you know it, right? And you have it readily available. They're 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They do multiple languages available. So, even if your family is, from a different country and you're thinking, how do I help? There's actually multiple languages available. You can connect with actual mental health clinicians that are ready to talk. So, and for things that are a little bit lower, you can connect with peer support as well, and they can help triage you to some other resources. And so it's something where, like I said, you don't have to be in a crisis. You can just seek some advice, some resources. If you're having a bad day and you need to chat. They also have chat services where you can actually, if calling somebody is too much, right? Sometimes it's easier to chat with somebody via text or online. So there's also options for chat, and you can go to it's uptosd.org to access all of that information.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that. And one thing I wanted to ask was that, sometimes people think that if you ask the question about suicide, are you having thoughts of suicide, or that it's gonna, if they're not thinking about it, it's gonna maybe plant the seed of, or they're gonna all of a sudden start thinking about it, right? And I think I want to just kind of put that out. What's your take on that, or if someone's thinking that?
So that's one of the common myths about suicide, and that's learned through what you mentioned, Sebastian, at that question, persuade, refer, QPR training. So a lot of people struggle to want to ask the question or talk about it for fear of what you mentioned. I'm going to put that idea in their head and they're going to go ahead and do something pretty devastating. But in actuality, many folks already have that idea in their head. They're actually maybe waiting for someone to address how they're feeling, those behaviors that they're exhibiting, and asking directly about suicide will actually lower that kind of anxiety, opens up a line of communication, and really just start that conversation, because that is something that they've been contemplating, but maybe they're waiting for someone else to take notice of those signs that they might be giving off. So more times than not, it's never going to be, I'm going to be giving them that idea. It's now, I'm somebody that you can talk to about what you're thinking about in your head, and you can go to me because I can openly discuss this with you. So it is a very common myth, but that's we want to kind of eliminate that thought so that folks feel more ready and comfortable to speak on the subject of suicide with a loved one or someone that they're concerned about.
Thank you. Yeah, that's great to know. And I think as you both have said, I think people feel seen when they're asked more directly. And it can be a big relief in a way to be seen like that. I wanted to ask, the crisis stuff is really important, and I wanted to get your take too on, do you have any kind of like recommendations or tips or tools to be more proactive, to be able to be like more proactively staying on top of mental health, like other things that these could even be like things that you both find helpful when you're not in crisis, but you're kind of feeling like you're sort of going in that direction, just to kind of stay on top of it. Do you have any tips or tools or recommendations? Yeni, maybe I'll start with you.
Thank you for asking.
That's all the notes.
Yeah. So, funny enough, or I should say, yeah. So, obviously with this pandemic, right, all of our mental health has been challenged. I think it's for the first time in history that we all have a collective understanding that we can all be pushed to the edge of, of what we think we can manage and handle in life and in our mental sphere. And so, although people thought that the pandemic was going to lead to a lot of suicides and increase of just people not being able to take it, we actually saw a big decrease in our suicide numbers, not just here locally, but, even at a national level. And people sort of asked, how could that be? We're all so on edge and against each other and upset and trapped, right? And how could that be? And so a lot of it is actually because people were together, because people were spending a lot of time together. And so what suicide comes out of isolation and loss of hope, where you feel like like I was saying, you're alone. And so with everything that's happened, I think that the one amazing thing is that now that stigma hasn't gone away, but I think people are a little bit more open to even talking about it, to even saying to another person that they're feeling some sort of kind of way. And for some people, it's pushed them over the edge of what they thought they could normally handle. And for me, that was the case. So, overall, I've never had mental health care or anything like that. But the pandemic came and I felt like, oh, this is that feeling that I've been talking and teaching and preaching about to everybody, like when you feel like you're just against the wall. And I felt like, all right, well, I got to start implementing all the things I've been talking about and all the things that I've been working on, right? And all the things that I offer to everybody. And so literally when you ask that question, I'm like, these are all the things that I do and been doing since that happened. And it's things like, and I know it sounds cliche, but you rotate all of these different things throughout your days, throughout your weeks, throughout your months. And it's about eating different. So for me, I was eating a lot of sugars and breads, and I dropped that. So it was just kind of like, and then I eliminated sort of nighttime snacking because that was really sort of impacting me. I started to not drink alcohol anymore. I took that off the plate. And so I just kind of picked a few things. So it doesn't mean that I had to alter my whole reality, but I picked the things that were sort of making me the most sort of in a cycle, leading me into things that I wasn't happy about. And I, one at a time, I didn't do it all at once, but I started eliminating things. And then I started implementing things like yoga, meditating through YouTube, like things that were really easy, like go on YouTube TV or go on YouTube and put a 5-minute meditation. I would at night go to apps like, and not to plug them, but like really, they're really helpful for me, like Calm, like Headspace, like really these apps.
We're not anti the apps. We're not anti the apps. Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So, but they're helpful, right? And so for me, I'm like, this is really how I live, like all in the morning, instead of, stressing about the meeting for the day, I'll literally play like a work meditation piece that they have already decked out and ready for you to just play one day after the other. And it just, and so that rotation of things, getting out into nature, actually, because of all the things I learned from you and your presentation and the work that you brought to the council, I was able to really go back out and say, all right, we need to go into nature. We really need to get our kids back out there in places where they had open space, taking them back to the zoo, just doing things, the aquarium, just kind of getting back into the things that, make you happy, the sunshine, the sun hitting your face. And so implementing a lot of those pieces. And then when things got really bad, like, and you start to know that your check engine light, those things start kind of tapping out, because that did happen to me. Well, let's be honest, right? These things can only go so far. And then at some point I started feeling like, I think I need to start talking to somebody, because I'm sort of running out of things that can take care of the day-to-day, like the yoga, the working out, the food, the friends. I started going out with my friends a lot. During the pandemic, you didn't see anybody, so I started finding safe ways to see my friends, go walk at Seaport, masked up with a little bit of space between us. So seeing friends and family, calling virtually, started doing a lot of these things. And these are things that still work now, right? So even without the big pandemic on top of me, I do all these things, but I started to look for a therapist. I was kind of like, all right, this is, if I really want to prevent like a breakdown or, something worse, I can feel now that this is the time, because I'm not at the point where I feel like I'm, oh, it's this bad, but it's a point where, hey, let's recognize that I can use some additional help now. So I did. I reached out. I started talking to partners and friends about, hey, do you know somebody? Like, get a referral, right? Because that's the biggest concern. How am I going to find somebody that will mesh with me in a therapist level? And so, yeah, and I've been trying it out. I have a few, like 4 or 5 sessions. I have one actually tomorrow or next week. So, kind of doing that, and that's been really helpful. So pretty much anything and everything under the tool belt of self-care and supporting yourself, and just not being afraid to reach out and talk about it with other people. I think that was hard for people to hear me say that I was reaching out for help, but I'm like, no, this is what I do. And so walk the walk and talk the talk, right? I was like, I know what the tools are, I know what I need to do, and it's helping.
Totally. Yeah, lots of many wonderful points there. And I think it's really important. I appreciate your vulnerability to share that, but important that someone in a sort of leadership position, especially doing the work you do, there can be this, like, no, I don't think the company culture is this way, but there can be this thing that you have to have it all together all the time. And
that's
so
the
I think
perception.
yeah, like if you're a suicide prevention trainer, you can't be struggling. So to be living it, walking the walk is really great. And I know that's going to be, great for lots of people to hear, and then great for people to see at CHIP, to see that you don't have to be a, superhero or like no issues to be doing this work.
Yeah. And, we've unfortunately, we've lost partners, to suicide. And that's really hard, because you think to yourself, well, you had the resources right there and you knew what to do. Why didn't you do it? And you don't want it to be because of the stigma that, around this expectation that we're all just have it together, and it's like, and having it together. And the interesting part is that suicide is from a lot of things packed up over each other. It's not just kind of like, oh, now I want to hurt myself or kill myself. And so the more that you can take care of all the little fires that are happening, or the little concerns that you're having, then it won't build up into, feeling those bigger, stronger feelings, if you kind of try to really work through the smaller ones while you can before they pile up.
Yeah. Yeah. Excellent points all around. Lora, anything, that was pretty comprehensive, but anything you want to add from your own experience or practice, I guess?
Yeah, this past year of the pandemic, a lot of stressors emerged. And one of the things that was very activating for me was anytime you get a news alert or see something on TV, or even a headline that was just, wow, there's so much going on. So I actually try to give myself a cleanse from some of those kind of media that was very activating. So I recommended for myself, like, just turn off your phone for X amount of hours. Just don't take a look at, a headline or your laptop or your computer, so that you can, just take time for yourself. And with that, it's kind of included more of a routine on my end. So we always hear the term self-care, and sometimes folks brush it off like, oh, if I have time for it, but you need to make time for it. You need to be intentional about it. So similar to what you do every day, you brush your teeth, you make your bed, you eat. There's about, some time all embedded throughout your days where you can have 5 minutes of just taking a walk outside, 5 minutes of texting a friend. And that's something that's really gotten me through at least this past year and a half or so, is just staying connected with others. So if I found myself in kind of an overwhelming position, I knew about 3 or 4 people that I could turn to, even if it was just through FaceTime, even if it was just through text. It was a little bit more of I find solace in a person that can hear me out, can hear me vent, provide me with advice, or even just make me laugh. So just finding a good support network that, doesn't, that will be there for you during your times of, happiness and, excitement. And then also those times where you're overwhelmed and stressed, and they can hear you and be that sounding board. So just to add on, including self-care as part of your routine. And then also finding those go-to people when you're feeling overwhelmed, and staying a little bit disconnected. I know we've learned a lot about that through you, Sebastian, and just finding ways to put your phone out of your vicinity, and then just take some time for yourself.
Yeah, very, very Nature Unplugged aligned. I appreciate it. But yeah, all great tips. That's really great stuff all around. Okay, so we're kind of coming to the end of our time together, and I put this out there at the end of the episodes. always, there's been, I think, a lot of very tangible tips, but I always like to do kind of one final challenge to our listeners. And I wanted to put it out there to you both to see if you had any challenge to our listeners today.
So I'll start with my challenge, and then I know Laura will have her own little challenge. So you'll get a 2-for-1 challenge.
Double challenge. Okay, double challenge.
Double challenge week. So my challenge to everybody watching is to start the conversation. So, share about this podcast with a family or a friend or someone, whether it's someone that you're concerned about or just someone that that you've never talked about this before. In general, I think it would be a great way to sort of be able to not just, learn more about it and about the other person and where their feelings are about it, but just to be able to share with them what you've heard here and the resources that are available. And that's already a big step, because it'll show them that, you're a good resource for them and someone that they can trust to come to if anything does arise. So you'll be a good resource. So that is my challenge for everybody.
Awesome, Yeni. I love it. Start the conversation. Yeah, share the resources. I love it. Okay, thank you. And Laura, how about you?
Sure. So maybe you may not know how to start the conversation or know those resources. So if you want to, be prepared for that, we really challenge you all to take a suicide prevention training. So we've mentioned this a couple of times before. We have what's called Question, Persuade, Refer, or QPR. There's suicide prevention gatekeeper trainings, about 90 minutes in length, free for anybody here in San Diego County. And they're available virtually on a monthly basis through CHIP and the Suicide Prevention Council. And you can take one once a month with us by visiting our website, www.spcsandiego.org. And you can see a list of our upcoming trainings. And in that 90 minutes, you'll learn about suicide data. You'll dispel myths about suicide. You'll learn about the warning signs. You'll also learn how to use those 3 steps: question, persuade, refer, to help save a life. And following that, we answer any questions that you might have. And after you take that training, you should feel empowered to be able to ask the question, start that conversation, and then also find ways to refer resources to others. So highly recommend that. And you can go again to our website, www.spcsandiego.org, to take that training.
Wonderful. Yeah, I highly recommend it it doesn't have to be, you don't have to be specifically working in the world of mental health. It's for everyone, anyone and everyone. It's a gatekeeper training, like frontline training, super, super valuable. I got a ton out of it. Well, awesome. Well, that wraps it up. Anything you want to share before we kind of formally close out? I just want to thank you again for taking the time to be here. I know you have a lot going on.
Yeah. Well, just as we mentioned earlier, the more the merrier for us. It does take all of us to be able to help prevent suicide. So we do, if any of this sparked any interest in you and to learn more about the council, to participate, the more people that are part of our council, the stronger the force to be able to get to our goal of 0 suicides in our county. So we definitely want you to join us, connect with us. The SPC is open to everybody. We have monthly meetings on the 4th Tuesday from 10 to 11:30. They're via Zoom, so it doesn't matter where you are, you can join in. And you can connect with a network of over 75 partners that are all in different aspects of mental health and suicide prevention here in San Diego County. We have 8 active subcommittees that you can join or be a part of that are more intimate: our assessment and evaluation, media, schools for K through 12, higher education, faith organization outreach, our priority populations and communities, means reduction, and postvention. So, please come join us and help us save some lives.
Beautiful. Yeni and Laura, thank you so much for taking the time to be on here. And that'll do it for this episode of the Nature Unplugged podcast. You can find our episodes on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Spotify, basically wherever you want to get your podcast, you can find it there. We'd love it if you could take a moment to subscribe and rate us on Apple Podcasts. That helps us a ton. And be sure and check out www.natureunplugged.com for more information and resources. We will, of course, share in the show notes. We will share the links to the Suicide Prevention Council and to CHIP and to the Access and Crisis Line, all that information, the National Lifeline, all that stuff will be there. Thank you all so much for listening, and we will catch you next time.
Change like seasons out of our control. If you think you should go, I will let you go.